Hey guys, John from flighttraining.com, and in a previous video we talked about how to choose the right CFI. Now we're going to talk about, once you found that right CFI, how do you ensure that you get the most information out of them, and how do you ensure that you use your time effectively with that person to glean the most information you can, learn the most, and become the best pilot you possibly can, of course in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of money spent. So, first things we're going to talk about here as far as getting the most information out of a CFI. Make sure that you're working with a comprehensive syllabus and that you're following along with that syllabus. Now, if you pick the right CFI, they'll already have a syllabus for you that they've used with other students that they find to be successful. Now, every syllabus doesn't fit every student, and that's why I love Part 61 training versus Part 141. Sometimes it's okay to do Lesson 5 before Lesson 3 if it fits that particular student. Most students will fall into a lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 progression, but it's totally fine to do things out of order if the CFI deems it appropriate to fit that student best. So, make sure they're following a syllabus so that you get a comprehensive idea of what you're going to be doing in training. It's important for you to know what's coming next so that you can prepare yourself so you can be best ready to learn what's coming next. If you're always just showing up to the airport for a 2-hour flight lesson, going, hey, I'm here for the next 2 hours and I'm ready to fly for 1.2 or 1.3 or whatever we're gonna do today, you have no idea what's happening, you're not using your time effectively or the CFI's time effectively. You have to be prepared before you show up to the airport for what's happening that lesson that day. Now, you're still gonna brief what you're going to do with your CFI, but if you've shown up and you have no idea and you're just waiting for them to tell you what's gonna happen that day, worse yet, you get into the airplane and you didn't actually have a good ground briefing before you got into the airplane, you can rest assured that you're pretty much wasting your money and your time because you're not going to learn much on that flight. You'll still learn something, but not nearly as much as if you had prepared beforehand using a syllabus, had an idea of what's going to happen, and then briefed on the ground, and then gone up in the air and done it, and then debriefed effectively. So, make sure you're using a syllabus, and make sure the CFI is providing one to you. Okay to jump around, but still have a syllabus so you can put all the checks in the boxes before you go for your check ride and you're comfortable and familiar with everything that you need to know. Next thing is, a good CFI would also have a standardization manual of maneuvers to provide to you. Standardization manual is a fancy way of saying basically an illustrated diagram of certain maneuvers and how to do them, all the nitty-gritty technical details. How do you do slow flight? Well, there'd be maybe 10 or 11 steps to slowing the aircraft, reducing power, pulling on carb heat, setting flaps, so on and so on. The speeds you're going to do slow flight at, maybe 5 degrees pitch nose up to initially, and then whatever pitch you need to hold at certain airspeed. Standardization manuals simply, and we'll give you a little example here, just detail out how a maneuver is done. Even something as simple as takeoff. How do you take off in the airplane? How do you do a normal traffic pattern, a normal landing? So standardization manuals are great. And for common aircraft like Cessna 172s, Piper Cherokees, Arrows, Archers, 152s, things like that, there's plenty of standardization manuals out there available on Google, and your CFI probably already has a copy of one that they like to use for the particular airplane they're going to train you in. Now, the other thing you want to check is the availability of pertinent documents. So you want to make sure that the weight and balance is on board, the aircraft registration, airworthiness, and POH. Well, those are 4 required things that are legally required, and of course you wouldn't go flying without them, but you as a student really need to know where they are, and you as a student need to start taking on some responsibility as you go through flight training to make sure that those documents are on board each time, and that you know where to find them, and that they're current. Check the registration before your first flight lesson. Check the weight and balance. Check the airworthiness certificate. Check that it confirms the N number and the serial number both match. So make sure the POH is on board. All the required things you as a student should be able to know. And if you don't know about them, ask your CFI, they'll show them to you, and then you can continue to check that during your pre-flights to make sure you have all the required documents to be legal to fly. And also, be familiar with those documents because there's a lot of really good information on them. Like, when does the registration expire? Well, it says right on it. What about all the other things you want to know about the airplane? Well, it's all in the POH. Be familiar with what that book is so you can hop in the airplane maybe a few minutes before your flight lesson. Say you got a noon to 2 p.m. flight lesson. Come out to the airport at 11 o'clock. If the airplane's on the ground, go ahead and pre-flight it, pull out the POH, and sit in the cockpit for a little bit, thumbing through it, and you'll find some pretty interesting information in there that you may not otherwise cover with your CFI on a regular basis. Other things, supplemental handouts. Your CFI should have these. Things like, oh, you're doing your first night flight next time? Cool. Well, here's 3 pages, short, sweet, concise, about what to expect on your first night flight. Things about how your eye works. Things about illusions we see at night in regards to the width of the runway versus the length of it. How high or low you appear to be. A helpful handout prior to the lesson is something that you should take home, study, and then you're more well informed when you show up for your first night flight, 2 or 3 days later, whenever you scheduled your flight. Again, your CFI should have these supplemental handouts. If they don't volunteer it, ask them for them, and they either have them or they'll find them for you. Also, as you go through flight training, make sure that you and your CFI both compare your progress to the ACS, not PTS. At least for the private pilot anymore, and the instrument, it's now ACS is our testing standards. PTS still applies to commercial and CFI. Eventually everything will move to the ACS standards, but those are basically just the testing standards. They say, you should be able to maintain altitude within plus or minus 100 feet on this particular maneuver. So make sure you're comparing yourself to that, so when you go out and do steep turns and you lose 75 feet, you can say, okay, well, hey, I met the PTS, I'm within the PTS, but yeah, I still lost 75 feet, and I need to be a little bit better. I need to lose, 0 feet, preferably. Compared to if you just go out there and lose 75 feet, you may not know, if you're not comparing yourself to the ACS, how you stack up against what the FAA is expecting you to stack up to at the private pilot level. So make sure when you're debriefing with your instructor that they're referencing the ACS and that you can reference it too to see where you should be. Just because you're within the ACS, don't expect your instructor to pat you on the back and tell you you're an awesome pilot and you're ready for a check ride and good for you. We look for you to be within the ACS, but preferably, like I said, losing 75 feet within the ACS, we'd prefer you lose none. And there may be other things that your instructor is concerned about, certain quirks to the way you're flying the airplane. Although it's within standards, it may be way too aggressive, or maybe a little delayed, or there may be some other hazardous thing that you're missing there. So always trust your instructor's judgment, but use that ACS appropriately to supplement that. Also, make sure you're using proper, concise ground study material. Those supplements that I talked about, referencing the aircraft documents on board the aircraft, and then stick to a really specific ground study. You can use our ground school online, which is awesome. It covers everything you need to know, and it's pretty concise. It's all in one place. You just watch all the videos and read some of the little articles. You could use one book. One book I love, if you're a book person, you're not a video person, stick with Rod Machado's Private Pilot Handbook. It is literally one book of pretty much everything you could ever want to know about being a private pilot. And if you read this one book, well, I mean, that should be pretty much good enough. You got the right CFI. And that makes it really simple, so you're not carrying around a stack of 7 books trying to make sense of all this stuff. And what should I study now? It's just way too overwhelming. Stick with one thing. It's so much easier. Lastly, make sure that as you progress through training that your instructor is using stage checks. And what those are is after you progress through maybe their first 10 lessons, have an evaluation flight. So not necessarily where they're teaching anything more. You can still learn and they can still teach on that flight, but where they evaluate your progress and kind of stack it up to where they think you should be after 10 lessons. It's great to do these stage checks with a different CFI. Might make you a little uncomfortable flying with someone else, but you'll learn a few other things. Sometimes things that your first primary CFI is constantly reminding you about will be a little bit easier to understand from somebody else because they just explain it slightly differently, and all of a sudden it clicks, and there you go. So definitely try to fly with other CFIs on occasion. Don't fly with 7 different CFIs. Have your primary CFI and maybe have one other that you fly with. Preferably do the stage checks rather than with another CFI. See if your local DPE, your local designated pilot examiner, will do those stage checks for you. Maybe a pre-solo stage check, a pre-solo cross-country stage check, and a pre-private pilot check ride stage check right when you're at the end of training ready to go for the check ride. If the DPE is willing to do those with you, they're also an instructor. They probably have tons of experience. They constantly test and evaluate private pilots, so they're great to give you feedback as to how you stack up to meeting those private pilot standards when it comes time for a check ride. And also, it makes you more comfortable and familiar flying with them as an instructor when they're evaluating you on a stage check and they're there to help you, compared to then just flying with them for the very first day on your check ride when they're there to test you and evaluate whether or not you should hold a private pilot's license or be returned back to your flight instructor for more training. So, If you can fly with the DPE before going for the check ride to evaluate you, give you some good feedback, maybe just to kind of a stage check or a mock check ride, great thing, probably one of the best things you can do throughout training. So there's lots of other things you can do. Of course, you'll hear lots of other tips from other people around the airport. Take as much in as you can, but just stay on focus, stay on target, try to make things as simple as possible for yourself. Hopefully these tips are helpful for you. If you have any questions at all, go ahead, leave them in the comments below. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see y'all next time. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching, and thank you for all your support on Patreon. It is a huge help in making the dream of a comprehensive, free online ground school a reality. As always, if you have any questions at all, leave them in the comments below, and be sure to share us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, all the other social media sites, so your friends and family can find us and also take advantage of this great free resource. Be sure to give us a thumbs up on our video and subscribe to our channel to make sure that you keep up with all our latest episodes as they're released. And remember, if you can't fly every day, then fly8mikealpha.com. We'll see you all next time.